Do you want me to tell you who you have to draft in your fantasy basketball draft? Well, I'm not going to because we all have free will. But I'm going to give you some pretty bloody good suggestions. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. I'm sticking out my gut for the Rizzler, and my name is also Josh Lloyd, who is the lead fantasy basketball analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok, at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram, at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Thank you also to everyone who jumped in the live stream earlier today. It was great. Thousands of people in there. Get to as many questions as we can. I'm pretty rooted after it, to be honest. 3.5 hours live was a lot, but it was fun. And I love doing it, interacting in those live streams. We do have live streams once per week minimum. And we do run pre-game shows 4 days a week as well. So lots of live interactions coming up during the season. So this is a show that will garner lots of eyeballs. Welcome to you guys who are preparing for your fantasy basketball draft now. The concept of a must-draft player is a fallacy. But what I'm going to do is detail some stuff in each round of a draft of players who I think are a little bit underrated. Now, in the past, I had a certain format for doing these shows. I tried to mix it up a bit when I did the Points League one. I didn't love how it turned out. It felt a bit unwieldy. It was me looking at, well, if you draft this guy in round 1 of a 10 or a 12 or a 14, and it was just too much bullshit going on the screen. So I am focusing this one back to how we've done it in the past, talking about 12-team leagues for category leagues using standard categories of guys that I think are available majority of the time in that round, basing it on ADP across Yahoo, ESPN, and we are including Fantrax here. I didn't do Fantrax for points leagues because not many people play points leagues on Fantrax. Do category leagues over there as well. So I'm not going to be doing this guy's must draft or do not draft in a 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Sorry, the show I didn't think flowed very well in those points leagues ones. But I think we're just going to go with this one here in category leagues. Of course, if you want minute detail on projections of each player and where they stack up, that's what we do at Basketball Monster. So you can check out all of those evaluations. Remembering that drafting everybody strictly off value is not a great way to go, but when you're looking for options, you want guys that will hit. You want someone, even if it doesn't narrowly focus into your pairing or build or whatever you want, getting extra value is more important than that. So when you see guys falling past ADP, past where you project them by significant margins, you generally just grab them. So a lot of the guys on this list, I think, fall into those categories because I think that their current average draft, someone will ask ADP, because we are getting new people in. Welcome, love everyone new. ADP stands for average draft position. So over all of the drafts that these sites run, including some mock drafts, I believe some sites do it, it is on average, what pick does this player go? It is not always it's never what is going to happen exactly in your draft, but it gives us a general idea of the range in which these players go. Is that enough of an intro? I think so. Let's look at round 1. Of course, the best players in fantasy basketball sit in round 1. You are not going to make too many mistakes in picking these guys. Don't overthink it. The general fantasy community spends way too much time debating, well, I've got pick 4, man. What am I going to do? Don't worry about it. Take whoever. Like any of these guys who are around that area, you'll be okay. It's when you make an absolute blunder of a guy who's got no shot of getting within 40 spots of your draft pick, and you make that at pick 50, that's when you get in trouble. Not that you took the 6th ranked guy at pick 4. That doesn't do it. That doesn't screw you. But because they're the big names, because they're the big producers, that's what you focus on. And yes, there can be big differences between people in the first round. But I'm talking about decision-making, brain power, and time that takes into, well, what do I do in this spot versus this spot? If you spend too much time on it, it doesn't work out well for you, or it just takes away from other strategies or other ways of learning about other players. In saying that, a few guys really stood out to me as having some value. I think that the fact that Tyrese Halliburton has an ADP of 7 is pretty foolish. I could make a cogent argument for Halliburton to go at pick number 2. I won't take him at number 2, but I might. He could go at 3. He could go at 4. He should not slip outside the top 4. And having the gap of him not falling outside the top 4 in my mind, but with an ADP of 7, meaning, again, in drafts, he falls past 7. This is an average. It's an average. So he's going at 6, he's going at 8, he's going at 9, he's going at 5 or 4. So wherever you sit, outside of pick 1, and Halliburton's there, he is a target. And that goes for Yahoo and ESPN, where his ADP sits at 7 on both sites. Remember, sites ADP is across all leagues. Category leagues, different category leagues, points leagues. It's all across them. In a Yahoo points league, I don't think I'd take Halliburton at 7, but it contributes to this ADP. Good value. And then on Fantrax, I think Steph at ADP 8 is also good value. Now, Halliburton's got some value there too. But Steph, I think on a per game basis, could easily be the 3rd best player or 4th best player. I think he's going to do a little bit more scoring. He's elite at threes, obviously elite at free throws, very good field goals, get some steals, get some assists. Injury and age is a concern for Steph, quite clearly. But at pick 8, I wouldn't be letting Steph go past 7. I would consider him at times at 6. And if I had health, if I knew he was playing 66 games, I would probably take him 5. Honestly, I would consider Steph over Luka Doncic in category leagues. 2-game playoff week impacts Luka, remember. But Steph, I think, is, again, we use the term must draft because that's what people search. There's not must draft. These are just guys where I look at them and go, yeah, there's a bit of something there, isn't there? As I hit the button, it doesn't work. You have so many things going on in your life. I have so many things going on in my life. We all know this. But sometimes it's important to be able to get the best out of ourselves. And we know that there are times where you sit there and your brain gets in your own way. You're sitting there and you go, man, I should clean this up. And your brain goes, nah. And you go, yeah, you're right, nah. But it impacts what you do, whether it's cleaning up or getting a task done at school or work or whatever it is. Sometimes our brain is our own worst enemy. Therapy can help you figure out what is holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. Figuring out the best way to motivate yourself internally and figure out what those issues are that are stopping you doing the things that you need to do is where therapy comes in. I found that really useful for me as well. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out an online questionnaire and then BetterHelp will help match you to a therapist that fits what you need, because that's key as well. No point trying to talk through your problems with someone you don't connect with. And if you find you don't connect when you meet with your therapist, well, you can change to a new therapist free of charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Okay, so let us now move ahead to round 2 and have a look at guys that are providing value. Now, as a general rule, I'm looking at ADPs that sit in the middle to the end of a round to give you ideas of guys who are generally, no matter what pick you're at, going to be there. We're sitting in round 2 here with an ADP of 18. Trae Young is there. I took Trae Young at 13 in multiple mock drafts last week. Trae Young has concerns with turnovers, but you know what I don't care about? Turnovers. His three-point shooting did drop off quite significantly last season. I think he's going to be able to improve somewhat, but also just getting high points, high free throw percentage on high volume, and high assists, and reasonably high threes is a very, very viable commodity. He's also never had a major injury, which is a big tick that can happen at any point, but he's had multiple injuries and he just bounces back super quickly. I don't know how he heals from ankle injuries so quickly, but he does. He's still entering his prime. And we talked about it on Categorical Scarcity show last week. If you don't get points and assists early, you're not getting them as a general rule. And this bloke might lead the NBA in assists while averaging 27 points a game. and he's available in a lot of spots. ADP 18. LaMelo Ball has an ADP 19 on ESPN, and I could say the same thing about him. Like, if you don't get points and assists, you don't get them. And LaMelo Ball gets them. He has a 2-game playoff week in the week ending March 24th, which is my finals week, first week of Yahoo standard playoffs, which dings him a little bit. Otherwise, I'd take him like 8. But he's available nearly every pick in round 2, apparently, on ESPN. There are a lot of people obviously concerned about the ankle injury, and I'm not. I'm just not. I don't think it's something to be worried about. He's not injury prone. He doesn't have a repeated history of multiple ankle injuries. He just hurt his ankle. He came back too early and stepped on a fan's foot and rolled it again, then came back too early and rolled it again. Is that something that's likely to continue? I don't think so. So I like LaMelo at an ADP 19. And if I'm on Fantrax, I took Devin Booker at 14 in my 14-team league the other day. He's got an ADP of 18. Now, is 14 to 18 a big difference? Not really. But when we're talking about the first 2 rounds, if I can get 4 to 5 spots perceived value on a pick, which I think you do get with Booker, that's good. That's really good. Now, there might be some concern that Booker loses usage because Beal is there. I don't think that they're going to be taking the ball out of Booker's hands a ton. He's efficient. He shoots well from the line. He hits threes, maybe more of them. And I think we're going to see a sizable spike in his assist numbers. I think he averaged 5.5 last season with Chris Paul there. It won't hit 10, but could he hit 7? Sure. I love Devin Booker at the start of round 2 in a 12-team league. I like him in that 14-15 zone. He's going at 18, which also means that sometimes he goes at 19 or 20 or 21. That's what ADP means. So you're getting him at the back end of the second round. Yeah, I would be pretty chuffed with that. In round 3, you're going to hate some of these names here, but I don't care. Paul George has an ADP of 31. 31. Paul George, you can draft in the 40s in some leagues. This is on Yahoo. If I'm sitting in round 3, and you've seen it on a lot of my mocks, or maybe you haven't. If you haven't, go check them out. I'm sitting there in the middle of round 3. Paul George comes around pretty often. And Paul George is, at worst, a top 25 player. Now, a James Harden trade could change a lot of different things. Maybe. I don't know. But I would find it hard that taking Paul George at ADP of 31 or lower would end up being a disaster for me. Paul George does not routinely rest. He does not, despite what you may have been lied to about. He does not. He had a hamstring injury, which is not great. Another knee injury, not ideal. Not another. He had a knee injury. Players get hurt. It does happen. Do I have faith that Paul George is going to play 80 games? No. But I don't have anything that's telling me that he's got an underlying problem that's going to cause missed time this season. And again, the fact that he's down at 31 is providing you that value. And the same goes with Jim Butler. Now, I always will push back on people who tell me that Jimmy Butler was a top 10 fantasy player in previous seasons because they're counting turnovers, and you know my opinion on that. But Jimmy Butler at 30, which is middle of round 3, is falling too far there on ESPN. They got worse. They didn't get better. Butler does bring great free throw percentage on great attempts, strong assists, fantastic steals, pretty good scoring. He played a decent chunk of games. That's not always going to happen. But he is a guy that I would consider at the turn of round 2, like 20, 21, that area. And ADP of 30, imagine he pushes to 35, 36. That's tremendous. And then on Fantrax, Fred VanVleet's got an ADP of 30. Again, that's middle of round 3. Yeah, he's on a new team. There can be some concern with that, but we're primarily talking about head-to-head category leagues here. So his bad field goal percentage does not matter. You build around it. He brings great steals, very good blocks for a guard. He's a solid assist player. The minutes are going to be strong. Now, he won't play Nick Nurse minutes, but you know who wasn't far behind Nick Nurse minutes when he used to coach in Boston? Yeah, it's the new Rockets coach, Ime Udoka. He pumped the minutes in. So he's not going to be playing 31 a night, I wouldn't have thought. Maybe he does. But I think we're getting maybe a round of value out of VanVleet here, which when we're drafting in round 3, even if you just return value, we'll give you 5-6 spots, it's pretty good. And he sits in a pretty nice spot there to me. Round 4, a couple of other somewhat risky guys, I guess. But Kristaps Porzingis is down in 44. That's meaning that sometimes you get him in round 5. I do agree that him arriving in Boston is going to hurt his usage. It will not be the number 1 usage player that he was in Washington the year before. And I was a little concerned about how it would all work with Rob Williams there. Will that impact his rebounds and his blocks? But Rob Williams isn't there. Al Horford's not going to play every game. He's not. So Porzingis is going to play a lot more at center. He played a lot at power forward last season. I think his blocks and rebounds probably rise. And honestly, he was the best player on the Wizards last season. So while he will lose some usage, you're talking about losing usage from being, a top 18 player last season? And now he's at 44. The plantar fascia issue's gone. He's fine. He's healthy. He's no problems. Yes, he will lose value. That is baked into that ADP 44. And I think baked in too much. It's baked on, in fact. Can't get it away. But you can take advantage of him. On ESPN, I know. I know that Jim Harden is frustrating. I know that we don't know about Jim Harden. Will he play for the Sixers? Will he be on the Sixers? Will he be on the Sixers and not play? Will he get traded to the Clippers? I don't know. But when James Harden plays, he is a, at worst, top 15 fantasy player. And you are talking about getting him at pick 44, maybe the end of round 4, on an ESPN draft. I find it very hard to believe that James Harden just doesn't play. I would say that is a very low likelihood. Does he come back and play for Philadelphia? I don't know. Does he get traded somewhere? I also don't know. But we're at the stage where I'm not doing it in round 2. I'm doing it in round 4, maybe round 5 even. And the risk of that is so marginal that you do it. And then I have been notorious. Notorious is not correct because nobody cares. But I have mentioned many times that, hey, I think Jaren might be overrated in fantasy. Why are we taking him at pick 12? So people often will use that to suggest that I hate on Jaren or I wouldn't want to take him. And I hate him, I think, at 25 or something like that. Because of the way that I view blocks being overrated, blah, blah, blah. And the fact that his block rate dropped when Ja Morant went down last season or when Ja Morant was out last season and Jaren's usage spiked, and that's going to happen for the first 7-8 weeks of the season or whatever it is. But come on, 42 is an insane number for Jaren to be drafted at, which is his ADP on Fantrax. There is nothing that makes any sense about that. Jaren is totally reasonable at the end of round 2, way more reasonable at the beginning of round 3. In the middle of round 4 here, though, at pick 42, I do not understand it on Fantrax at all. That is tremendous value for Jaren in that spot over on Fantrax, and I think you should take advantage of it. Is that must draft? Yeah. If I'm sitting at 42 or 43 or 40 or 37, I'm drafting Jaren Jackson basically every time. You want to talk must draft? That's it. Today's episode is also brought to you by the GameTime app. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Concerts, musicals, comedy, and of course sporting events, Major League Baseball playoffs, the start of the NHL season, the NBA season, college football. Whatever tickets you're looking for, GameTime is going to have them. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They got this thing called zone deals as well. You pick a section, and GameTime picks the seat. I want to sit there, and GameTime goes, don't worry, I'll find you a little seat right in there, and just because you let me pick it and you trusted my judgment so much, you can save on average 18%. That's how GameTime thinks. What a generous, benevolent being. Yeah, fantastic. So, download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So let's have a look at round 5. And there are a couple here that I really do enjoy. And let's start on Yahoo because the big fella in Brooklyn, Nick Claxton, has an ADP of 55. Now, you'll say, Josh, when you've looked at things and put your metrics out there like Durant, doesn't that reduce the value of shot blockers? It sure does. But Claxton at 55, I see no reason why Claxton should be ranked there. Claxton is going to be the starter. Are there concerns about him and Simmons fitting together? I guess a little bit, but Claxton's their guy. Claxton's going to average big blocks. He's going to rebound the ball. He's going to be a good field goal guy. He's actually a decent enough assists and steals player. Assists aren't great, but they're not putrid. He's probably never going to get threes, but he can score a little bit. He can pass a little bit. He's going to be bad at free throws, but again, in a head-to-head league, we can deal with a negative very easily. So waiting until the middle of round 5 for Claxton, if you happen to wait until round 5 and Nick Claxton is there, good luck. Now, the quality of your league is going to be very interesting because most of the mock drafts I do, you see this run between 35 and 43 where Porzingis and Claxton and Jaren's probably already gone, but Mobley and all these guys go. And by the time you hit 55, they're not available. But this is the real number. This is the ADP number. So if you're in a league, a bunch of casuals, maybe you're in a Yahoo Pro League, which they renamed to public leagues because some of the results I see come out of those are trash. Some of those guys just put them in because they want to put money in. Simple as that. Claxton going at 55 still gives you tremendous value. And I'll say the same for Evan Mobley on ESPN, who's going at 55. Now, Mobley hasn't really blown me away in the preseason. I'm not worried about that. But he's going to get an opportunity to play more center with Jarrett Allen maybe out to begin the season, which means more rebounds, blocks, and field goal percentage usually. It's year 3. Do we see a usage bump at all? I don't know. But I know that I'm very much willing to invest way higher than pick 55 in Evan Mobley. He's a borderline third-round guy who is 100% a fourth-round player, and we're talking ADP 55, which, of course, as you know, means sometimes he goes at the end of round 6. Or round 5, sorry. At the 60s. Crazy. And on Fantrax, Brad Beal has an ADP of 57. Now, Beal is going to lose some value. He is going to lose some usage, but he shot actually pretty well last season. Very strong field goal percentage. He is going to see his assists rise. I don't know if he gets his steals back. Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. But I think he's a fourth round sort of a player. And I get Brad Beal in quite a few mock drafts. End of round 5, sometimes round 6. And on Fantrax, that ADP at 57 suggests that is a possibility for me. Now, we've got round 6 here, and when I was pumping in my numbers, I'm always making adjustments to things, I didn't expect what I saw. But a guy that stood out to me in round 6 on Yahoo was the big fella, Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert. He's got an ADP of 64. Now, Gobert struggled at times last season. It was largely one thing. His blocks just disappeared. Yeah, his rebounds fell a little bit. But when blocks are running off the board, which they are in round 3 and round 4, and you're left with the decision between Rudy Gobert and DeAndre Ayton or reaching up for Mark Williams, Gobert is, at worst, I would say, a 5th round option, and you never have to get him there. Yeah, he's got bad free throws. That shouldn't matter. He's a very interesting player in this area. And I want to just point something out here. I don't know if you've noticed it, but Yahoo, when you go in to create a league on Yahoo, the same way on ESPN, it will default to points leagues. For some reason, these companies are pushing, hey, you guys should play points leagues. Okay, the majority still don't, but that's what they push. And as you will see, going through each of these rounds on Yahoo with their ADPs, from round 4 onwards, let me double check that. Round 4 onwards, round 4 onwards, every player on Yahoo who comes out as having tremendous value as a must-draft guy is a center. Because their rankings and their ADP and the way these guys are getting drafted is devaluing these guys. So while I might be able to come in and push back about the value of blocks and all that sort of stuff and tell you all that sort of thing, Yahoo's ADP numbers have devalued these guys even further, meaning they all actually turn into values. So maybe you don't have to reach up in round 3 if your league is adhering to Yahoo ADPs, because I've found finding guys who are 15, 20 spots better, in my opinion, versus their ADP in rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a lot, right? All the way through. On ESPN, this one is probably the dumbest thing I've seen. Fred VanVleet has an ADP of 68. Okay? Look, it might not be the same for VanVleet in Houston versus Toronto. That is true. But I could not, in any level of consciousness, let VanVleet slide to me at 68. And remember, an ADP of 68 means people are seeing him at 68 and going, nah, and letting him slide. Even in a points league, that's insane. 68 is larceny. VanVleet might be a top 25 player in a category league. Might be. That means maybe a second round player. and he's snagging here at the end of round 6. Ooh, that's fantastic. And then on Fantrax, DeAndre Ayton's ranked ridiculously, and his ADP is at 64. It hasn't really adjusted since the trade. To me, he's a round 4 top 45 player. But he's sitting there at an ADP of 64. Will that come in? Maybe. Has his preseason been setting on the world on fire? Not really either. But just by virtue of being a solid points, rebounds, okay blocks, not great, couple of assists, very good field goal percentage and strong volume, solid enough free throw guy for a big man, it beats this number. I don't think with too much of a concern. Round 7. A repeated name is on this list, but we'll start with Yahoo first. And of course, I've told you, it's going to be a center. Jakob Poeltl has an ADP of 82. Jakob Poeltl might not play 35. He might play 28 a night. And yes, he's got bad free throws, but you know what you can do with that, yeah? You can ignore it. Rebounds, blocks, field goal percentage. And if they run him the way that San Antonio did, given their lack of passing skill, which they used him as an offensive operator, hub operator type of player, well, Poeltl could average 4 assists a game to go with 12 points, 10 rebounds, 1.7 blocks, 65% shooting, 20 from the line. No, not 20, but maybe 60 from the line as well. And at pick 82, yeah, I love it. That's the end of round 7. He goes in the 90s sometimes. I've already told you about my feelings on Brad Beal, but his ADP of 80 on ESPN is ridiculous. If Brad Beal is sitting there for me at the end of round 7, meaning also sometimes he pops in around 8, like this is a top 50 guy still. Best behavior in Washington is top 20. Yeah, so he loses value like Porzingis. Not here. Not down to 80. No way. And then on Fantrax, Anthony Simons has an ADP of 83. Have the ADPs not adjusted since Lillard was traded? I was sort of drafting Simons expecting Lillard to be traded. He's going to be at least knocking on the door for top 10 in scoring. He hits threes. He goes to the line and hits them well. He'll get some assists. I don't have him in the same class as a Jordan Poole or anything like that, but he's going to have a lot of opportunities. And at 83, you're stealing money at that point. Round 8. Yahoo, guess what? Center. Mark Williams has an ADP of 96. I reckon he beats this by, let's say best case scenario is 50. Worst case scenario is 10. Average outcome is probably 30 spots. In most of my mocks, he goes in the 70s. But he obviously is getting drafted way later. And I still come across people who will question my picks of Mark Williams and go, oh, isn't he in a timeshare with Nick Richards? No, I don't believe he is. So therefore, you can get Mark Williams in round 8. And you can hopefully take advantage of it. Yeah, it's frustrating for Chris Paul. We don't know exactly what the role is going to be, but come on, at ADP 96, so meaning he goes outside the top 100, and that is actually reflected in a lot of the drafts I do. What are we doing here? This is a guy that was top 50 last season, Chrissy Paul. Has he lost a step? Yeah, he's 38, man. Like, he's not going to be the same guy, but over a steal, 12, 13 points, 7 assists maybe. I'm not taking him anywhere near upside. Like, he's probably best case top 50. Best case. Very best case. And at this point, I know he's old, but what the hell what are you losing out taking him here? I don't know whether he's going to start or not, but there are a lot of people also who go, well, Chris Paul will just play 24 a night. I would be pretty stunned if Chris Paul's playing 24 minutes a night. But if he is, it doesn't matter because you haven't wasted anything. And then on Fantrax, I don't know why I've got that ADP of 114. Is that right? Because Dan Gafford is absolutely a guy that we are looking at in this range. That is, I'm pretty sure that ADP was incorrect. Let me just double check that. That was his ESPN ADP, so I put that on, so my apologies. His Fantrax ADP is 92, Dan Gafford. 92. He has clear top 40 upside. Is he a very good real-life NBA player? Not particularly. But there's no one behind him. He blocks shots. He's a high field goal player. He's not a great rebounder, but he'll get there through minutes. He might average 14 points. At 97 or whatever it was, just a crazy value play, I think, there. An absolutely crazy opportunity to grab Dan Gafford at that position. Let's go and take a look in round 9. Couple more centers who are just constantly being undervalued. On Yahoo, this one's insane to me. Onyeka Okongwu has an ADP of 105. Is he still the backup? Sure he is. I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't know how many minutes he's going to play. But if he gets 23 minutes, he beats this. If he gets 25 minutes, he beats it by 30. If he plays 30 minutes, he beats it by 70. Getting to 30 minutes would be tough. It would require probably a Capella trade or injury. But he's also experimented playing him at the 4. This is just no downside. None at all taking a Kongwu at 105. I'm always in on him. Now, he goes in 70s in some drafts, but obviously he goes way later in others. On ESPN, Terry Rozier has an ADP of 105. It wasn't a great season from Rozier. He really struggled being pushed into a point guard role. I think his assists will come down. Maybe his usage comes down. But his efficiency should jump back up, and I don't really think anyone is taking his starting role off him. He should be a highly solid scorer, threes guy, some pretty good assists and rebounds, maybe over a steal, and hopefully get back some of that efficiency that he lost. But it's a zero downside play, which makes him a must-draft player in round 9. On Fantrax, Mitchie Robinson has an ADP of 108. Why is he there? Well, he's not a great scorer and he's a low free throw player, but we can punt a category. Yeah, we can deal with that. He's a very clear top 100 player, probably top 90 player in the right setting. And you just see how many centers slide down. This is also another reason why often a punt assists type build gives you good strength, because so many of the big men, they just are way below where their overall value should sit, meaning you're able to grab guys who might be top 80, top 90, top 50, 30, 40 spots later than that, building up a very strong team. You don't want all of them because you don't want to just put yourself into winning 5 categories every week. That can be a problem at times. But there's always a lot of value flying around. And then as we go into the final round that we're going to look at in round 10, there's more big men. Because again, they continue to be undervalued. On Yahoo with an ADP of 113, it is Zach Collins, who I believe without any doubt is starting for the San Antonio Spurs. You might want to try and talk yourself into Charles Bassey being there or Wembanyama starting at the 5, but I honestly don't believe that's the case. Zach Collins was a top 40 player post All-Star break last season after Jakob Poeltl was traded. Now, he's not going to be that player. A, he's not going to have the usage because there were so many guys sitting out at the end of that season. B, he's playing next to Victor Wembanyama. This is a big man who's a field goal and free throw percentage positive, who blocks shots, gets rebounds, passes, and scores, and hits threes. Honestly, in the right circumstances, he's Nikola Vucevic who blocks shots. He's never going to have that usage of Vuce, but he's got the same similar statistical profile. And getting him in round 10, and he's on Fantrax there as well with an ADP of 118. I love it. Absolutely love grabbing big fella Zach. And then on ESPN, Ben Simmons is an ADP of 117. Now, you will see Simmons go in the 70s in some drafts. Simmons is healthy. He is starting. He will play 30 minutes a night. He will not score very well, and he will be bad at free throws, yes. But he might have 7 rebounds and 9 assists with 1.5 steals and a block, with good field goals. He looks in a very different place to what he was last season. Is there a risk in it? Sure. Is there any risk at taking him in round 10? Absolutely not. It's got to be making sense on your team, but there are times when, hey, maybe you're not punting free throws, but bloody hell, Ben Simmons at this spot, maybe it doesn't work out. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, guess what you do? You just drop him. Who cares? This is maybe 40, 50 spots of value for even both of these guys, honestly, Zach Collins and Ben Simmons in round 10. I'm not going to go through round 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm going to talk about more of that in another show coming out this week, because that is real flyer territory stuff. Again, be really cautious about the must-draftness. Me saying that Zach Collins is a must-draft, sitting there in round 10, does not mean that, well, he's a must-draft, I've got to get him at 70. That's not how it works. And you will screw your draft up. Let the value fall to you. If someone's reaching to grab Zach Collins, it means someone else is going to push back. And you find that right value. That ends up being more important in a draft than narrowing specifically onto focused targets. I'm just giving you some ideas of guys that I think here are, in some cases, massively undervalued. In other spots where you can just snag a little bit of extra room in your build overall to get that extra value onto your team. Follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you are here on YouTube, please thumb that up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.